Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Evening the Odds for College-Bound Students, presented by ACT. Just a few housekeeping issues before we start. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch or share it with colleagues. You'll also receive a copy of the slideshow. Watch for an email from ACT with a link to both the presentation and the slides, along with other useful information in the next few days. You can interact with our presenters today using the questions panel on your screen. And you can also use this panel to let us know about any technical challenges you're having during the presentation. We'll make time for a Q&A with our presenters during the last 15 to 20 minutes of today's hour-long presentation. My name is Will Villette from the Marketing Department here at ACT. Our presenters today are Joe Booth, Director of Career and College Clubs at the National Council for Community and Education Partnerships, or NCEP, Dr. Alex Casillas, Principal Research Scientist at ACT, and Eva Luke, Gear Up Director at Alliance College Ready Public Schools. Today's presentation will present you with an introduction to the Gear Up and Career and College Clubs program and the ACT Holistic Framework. We'll cover how the Career and College Clubs program was redesigned using the framework, and we'll discuss how Alliance College Ready Public Schools implemented the Career and College Clubs curriculum. We'll also save some time at the end for a Q&A with our presenters. Again, just use the questions panel on your screen throughout today's presentation, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can and reach out via email if we run out of time. So with that, I'm going to turn over today's presentation to Joe Booth with NCEP. Joe?
Thank you, Will, and thank you to the entire ACT team for the partnership that we've established. ACT and NCEP have many touch points. I think I can speak on behalf of the entire NCEP team when I say we truly value our work together to serve students. On a personal note, I wanted to convey my appreciation to Alex for the many hours you've spent over the last year advising and guiding us as we expanded the Career and College Clubs curriculum. And thank you as well to Eva for taking time out of your busy schedule to share Alliance's experience so far with Career and College Clubs. To start us off, I'll take just a couple of minutes to provide some context on Gear Up, NCEP, and Career and College Clubs. Starting with Gear Up. Over the course of the next hour, you'll hear the term Gear Up mentioned many times. Gear Up, if you aren't already familiar with it, is a federal grant program designed to increase the number of low-income students who are prepared to enter and succeed in post-secondary education. Gear Up grants fund services that typically follow a cohort of students from the 7th grade through their first year of college. The first Gear Up grants were administered in 1999, and the growth and success of Gear Up is evidenced in its continued impact on students, families, schools, and communities. The reason you'll hear Gear Up mentioned is that NCEP is the National Association for the Gear Up program. It also happens to be where I work and the entity that offers Career and College Clubs. NCEP is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working to increase access to higher education for economically disadvantaged students. NCEP's national strategy to achieve this goal is divided into three main buckets: Excel, which includes the training we provide to Gear Up professionals, as well as programs and content to help the community have a greater impact. Prove, which includes NCEP's Research and Evaluation Department, who works with the community to evaluate and document the effectiveness of their programs. And Mobilize, which includes the advocacy we perform to ensure the community's voice is heard by policymakers. Career and College Clubs falls into NCEP's Excel bucket. Very simply, we developed Career and College Clubs in response to need. In the beginning, nearly 10 years ago, the program was focused on the middle grades because there weren't many college access programs in that space, particularly in underserved communities. So we created CCC to try to fill that need. Then, as CCC migrated to NCEP, we saw a need to expand the program to include the high school years and to ground the program more solidly in research on effective practices, which is where we are today. The work to expand the program was guided by a few principles: maintain the emphasis on underserved communities, focus on impact, align career and college clubs to gear up, and keep the program affordable. But to be clear, career and college clubs is not only for Gear Up programs. A large number of our partners are Gear Up programs, but we also have partnerships with public and private schools, districts, universities, states, and nonprofit organizations. We had planned to show a short video of students talking about their CCC experience, but it just didn't play well over the platform. And rather than have a distracting video, we thought we would just skip it. But I do encourage you to watch the video. There's nothing like hearing directly from students. The video will be posted on the ACT page for this webinar and can be also found on our website at careerandcollegeclubs.org. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Alex Casillas of ACT to talk about the ACT Holistic Framework and Career and College Clubs. Alex?
Thank you, Joe, for that introduction to Gear Up, NCEP, and the Career and College Club curriculum. I am having some difficulty moving my slides, so here we go. All right, so let me give you a little bit of context about the ACT Holistic Framework before then I can introduce you to our thinking in terms of how we helped to redesign the CCC curriculum using the Holistic Framework. And in particular, as you all are familiar with, individuals and organizations care about a broad range of outcomes. Now, it turns out that we all care about things like, getting good grades, graduating, finding fit in terms of major and career, being able to actually get a job, performing well at that job, and being happy and satisfied with our work and our lives. However, different stakeholders care about those outcomes somewhat differently. So for example, for individuals, they care about getting their diploma, getting a college education, getting a good job, and being satisfied. For educators, those might look a little bit differently. They care about their students earning good grades, being able to keep engaged students, having their students reach proficiency, and of course, having them graduate on time. For organizations, they care a lot about having a qualified workforce, right? They have to be proficient in the kinds of skills that are needed to perform work. They also care about having engaged workers, and they of course care about having satisfied and productive workers in order to continue to make the work that those organizations do to be fulfilling and productive. Now, again, interestingly, a number of us care about very similar things, but because we care about them differently, the same sort of all stale model of English language arts and mathematics doesn't always work to predict all of these things. Case in point, we know from the research and from many experiences and case studies that success is multidimensional. Simple examples here for educational success, you require students to successfully enroll in a course of education, to get good grades and good GPA, to be retained so that they can successfully graduate, and often they require to be satisfied in their experience in order for them to continue. Similarly, for work success, you require a number of different predictors, ranging from actually landing a job to performing well at that work, having good teamwork, and being able to endure through the different changes of the organization in order to be satisfied, and in some cases, be promoted to higher levels of work. So since success is multidimensional, shouldn't readiness for school and work focus on a diverse set of knowledge and skills rather than, again, some of the core skills around math and ELA? Not that those are unimportant, they are very important, but they are only a very limited portion of that picture. And so a few years ago, ACT developed the ACT Holistic Framework. And what that framework proposes is not necessarily a radical idea, but we're the first ones to really articulate a very comprehensive picture of what the skills, the knowledge and skills that are needed for an individual to succeed in educational and workplace contexts, what that looks like, based on research, both ours and that of the extant literature, and based on lots and lots and lots of experience that we've gained over the 50+ years that the organization has been around. And so those are core academic skills, cross-cutting capabilities, behavioral or often known as social-emotional learning skills, and education and career navigation. And what we have shown with our framework is that these skills are all kind of interrelate to each other, and they support each other as students advance from early education, like elementary and middle school, all the way through high school, into post-secondary settings, and in and out the world of work as people make the different transitions that they do throughout their journey. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about each of those areas, just to give you a sense of them, but know that there are lots of resources on our website that you can get into more detail if you like. So core academic skills are, of course, what you know and love, right? The knowledge and skills necessary to perform essential tasks in core academic content such as English language arts, mathematics, and science. We won't be talking very much about this, and CCC actually primarily taps some of these the other areas because these three core academic areas are already primarily covered in school settings. Cross-cutting capabilities are the general knowledge and skills that are necessary to perform essential tasks across academic content areas. And so often you hear these called 21st century skills. And these are things that are kind of blending multiple types of knowledge and skills to meet the demands of an increasingly demanding types of both academic and work types of settings. Collaborative problem solving, technology and information literacy, learning skills, as well as thinking and metacognition. And the CCC curriculum draws upon many of these content areas for their activities and lessons. Then moving on to behavioral or social-emotional learning skills. These are the interpersonal, self-regulatory, and task-related behaviors that are important for adaptation to and successful performance in both education and workplace settings. And in the ACT framework, we cover things like acting honestly, getting along with others, keeping an open mind, maintaining composure, socializing with others, and sustaining effort. And these are important constructs and characteristics that, again, the literature supports and that in practice, many practitioners, both educators and workforce professionals, support and emphasize in order to be ready to perform well at school and at work. And so the CCC curriculum covers all of these constructs in developmentally appropriate ways in order to make sure that students are getting more information on these areas that are not always typically emphasized in formal schooling. And last but not least, the framework covers education and career navigation skills. And this is what individuals know about themselves and their environments, how they use this information to make choices, to plan actions, and move along their education and career paths, basically how they figure out what their own journey is and how to get there. And that, of course, includes self-knowledge around things like interest and values and sort of what are the majors that are out there, what do I want to do when I grow up, for example. Environmental factors, right? What might be challenges or hurdles? What are opportunities out there, like financial aid? Integrating the knowledge and the factors to figure out what is the kind of path that one wants to take in terms of majors or careers. And then, of course, managing career and education actions is actually taking actions to see how your journey is moving along and making corrections as appropriate. And again, the CCC curriculum draws upon these concepts in order to further enrich the sort of knowledge and skills that students can gain as they're going through high school in order to be better prepared for the transition into college. So if, this is a very simplified model, but basically what the framework does is that all of these major, buckets of knowledge and skills are important to the range of outcomes that I listed at the beginning of this piece on the holistic framework, right? To getting good grades, to getting a degree, to finding fit, performing well at work, being satisfied, and all of those things. However, the role that each of them plays is different depending on the outcome. And so the value of the framework is that it's very comprehensive and that allows us to make better predictions and make better sort of matches between the kinds of things, the kinds of knowledge and skills that are important for a broad range of different outcomes. And again, many more details are provided on our website. We have both technical reports and issue briefs, so I certainly encourage people to visit that area. So now, how does that relate to the career and college clubs curriculum? Well, in the past, as Joe mentioned, NCEP and ACT have had a long partnership for many years, and we've helped to study some of the CCC outcomes even before CCC was redesigned more recently. And what we've shown is that CCC students are considered underserved learners, right? Part of the mission of NCEP and Gear Up is to really help advance the education of underserved learners. And so about 91% of CCC students in the past have been racial or ethnic minorities. And 99% of those students, their parents, did not have a college degree. Now, very encouraging is the fact that of those students who were participating in CCC in the past, 80% of them had plans to attend college. And that compares to about 64% of those students who are underserved learners but did not participate in CCC. So already you can see the needle moving in terms of at least the attitudes and the plans of those students. Further, what the previous research has shown is that CCC students are about 24 to 29% more likely to plan on taking their core academic curriculum classes in high school, which again is one of those things that is foundational to prepare students for a successful transition into post-secondary education. And in a more recent study conducted just a few years ago, about 62% of all CCC students had enrolled in college, and that was compared to only 46% of non-CCC students. So again, suggesting that we are moving the needle in terms of helping students to transition successfully into post-secondary education. However, a number of features around the implementation of CCC as it was designed earlier made it challenging to study. We didn't really know more specifically, are there particular activities that are leading to this success? Are there certain areas that maybe could be tweaked in order to make the curriculum even more successful? And so how do we get there, right? When we started redesigning this, we thought, what do we need to do in order to really improve that curriculum so that it not only takes advantage of the things that we already know are working well, but further imbue it with lots of research support and with the things that we know are going to be helpful to students as they transition into post-secondary education. And so we started with a theory of action, and many of you in education are probably familiar with this term, or at least a different name for it, which is theory of change. And it's really a process that is helpful to integrate purpose into design and development decisions. In particular, what we did is that we made very explicit what are the underlying assumptions about what we wanted to change or do. And all theories of action start with the end in mind. And for us, the end was really being the ultimate goal of CCC. What is that? Well, that ultimate goal is for a student to successfully complete a post-secondary education degree. And so we then walked that back from that ultimate goal. Well, what does that mean? Well, there may be moderate and short-term outcomes or goals that we're interested in, which means the student needs to be able to make progress towards that degree. They also, before they can make progress towards a degree, that means that they need to matriculate at a post-secondary institution and have that transition be successful from high school to post-secondary. And that also means that in order to make that transition successfully, they have to complete high school. They have to graduate high school with a diploma. And as you continue walking it back, you get to the actual intervention, which is the CCC curriculum. That curriculum, as Joe will provide you with more details, really is enriched with 5 content areas that are related to academic preparation, college and career knowledge, leadership development, socio-emotional learning skills, and professional etiquette. And there's activities and lessons that are at appropriate developmental levels for grades 7 through 12 in all of these areas for each of the grade levels. More importantly, we also had this broader tenets in mind. One, it had to be based in research. Again, that's where the alignment and leveraging the holistic framework came about. that these 5 content domains were going to be, important in every lesson and every set of activities. That it is peer-to-peer, because that is something that has demonstrated in previous versions of CCC that has been very successful. And there's also some research support for how peer-to-peer learning and modeling can be very important to be both engaging and effective in transferring knowledge. And then having implementation maps, which is brand new with this version of CCC, to make implementation easier, both for the organizations that are trying to implement it, but also for the researchers who are trying to study it, so that we can have a better sense of what's working well and what needs to be revised in order to continue to improve the curriculum down the road. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and transition to Joe again, so that he can tell you more about some of these specific content areas, how the learning objectives and all those things were crafted in this redesigned CCC curriculum.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. So as you saw in the last slide, Career and College Clubs is built around 5 domains. I'm not sure if the folks at ACT, if you can move to the previous slide with the gear. There you go. Thank you. Career and College Clubs is built around 5 domains. College and career preparation and readiness, where students explore their interests, career possibilities, college systems, admissions requirements, financial aid, in college life, among other topics. Academic preparation, here students identify and demonstrate successful academic behaviors and develop and implement academic plans for high school and beyond. Concepts they will engage in include academic responsibility, creating a rigorous and challenging high school academic plan, developing study skills, test-taking strategies, and college course planning. Leadership development, where students practice leadership skills and explore their relationship with their local community and the world. CCC provides opportunities for students to become school leaders through events designed to increase college and career preparation school-wide. Social and emotional learning, where students identify and practice skills for managing emotions, building relationships, and decision-making. This domain really cuts across the entire curriculum, but I wanted to just highlight one strand that the curriculum addresses head-on, and that's bullying. I wouldn't call Career and College Clubs an anti-bullying program, but we do repeatedly engage the topic and provide activities where students learn about conflict resolution strategies through role play. And finally, professional etiquette, where students learn and practice successful behaviors in professional settings. This domain really evolved from feedback we received from educators already using Career and College Clubs. It includes concepts like maintaining an online persona that actually helps your college and job prospects, building a resume, how to interview for a job or scholarship, and how to dress and present yourself. I particularly like the graphic on this slide because it visually conveys how these 5 domains are connected. Very few of the hundreds of activities, or the standards underlying them for that matter, address just one of the domains. For example, we have an activity that leads students through the process of planning and hosting a financial aid workshop. That activity falls under the college and career preparation, leadership development, and professional etiquette domains and addresses myriad standards for each of them. Can you advance the slide? Let's take a deeper dive into the college and career preparation and readiness domain. For each domain and grade level, NCEP reviewed the literature and with guidance from ACT, developed standards that identify the knowledge, skills, and actions students must master in order to be college and career ready upon graduation from high school. The standards are sequenced across grade levels to reflect an appropriate learning progression as well as to align with the college admissions calendar. For each standard, we created activities to help students meet the standard's requirements. So this slide shows the number of standards and activities for the college and career domain across all grade levels. We see that in 7th grade, there are 8 standards related to that domain and 22 activities. And you can see the same information for each grade level. I show this slide to demonstrate how the content of Career and College Clubs is spread throughout the 6 years of the curriculum and sequenced for each grade level. The next slide may help show that even further. I imagine many of you watching are frontline educators, working directly with students and looking for quality content that you know will have an impact. So this slide speaks directly to you. Here we see the number of activities by grade level and domain. You can get a feel for the volume of material and the relative weight of the 5 domains. So clearly, college and career readiness is represented, well represented, as well as social and emotional learning. And again, each of these activities is tied to at least one standard, and many of the activities are tied to many standards and fall into many domains. But when we talk about standards, what do we mean? Again, we're speaking of the knowledge, skills, and actions students must master in order to be college and career ready upon graduation from high school. NCEP developed these standards after reviewing the literature and consulting many seasoned educators and practitioners. So let's take a look at an example of the standards. Can you advance to the next slide, please? Each grade level has its own curriculum book that lists the standards for that grade. Here we see a page from the 11th grade book showing the standards for college and career preparation and readiness, as well as academic preparation. Focusing for a second on the college and career readiness standards, again, this is for the 11th grade. We see standards related to entrance exams, the FAFSA, college application process, career exploration, and so on. And again, for each of these standards, there are activities throughout the curriculum that help students to meet that standard. All of the standards for grades 7 through 12 are available on our website for you to review. That's careerandcollegeclubs.org. And we will link to the standards on the ACT website once the recording of this webinar is made available. Can you advance the slide, please? Each grade level curriculum book also lists the scope and sequence. So here we see a page, again, from the 11th grade book. We see the name of each module on the left, the scope of what's covered in the module, a list of the activities in the module, and the standards each of those activities relates to. Highlighting the obstacles and challenges module, there are a couple key points here to emphasize. First, you see in the scope that we use the word mentor, and this is very deliberate on our part. Students in the club are called mentors because they're learning to mentor each other and their peers. Career and College Clubs uses a peer-to-peer learning model, and for us, that means students in the club, the mentors, teach the curriculum content to each other, and then turn their focus to outside the club to help their peers prepare for college and career, and also to educate their parents on the process. And by the way, each club also has an adult facilitator, maybe more than one, that we call the coach. And the coach is usually a teacher, a counselor, Gear Up coordinator, or other school staff. And so in the language of career and college clubs, we don't have students and teachers, we have mentors and coaches. The other key point I want to highlight from this slide is about implementation. We recommend clubs work through the entire curriculum each year. You can start at the beginning of the scope and sequence and work your way through to the end. That way, you're sure to cover all of the standards. And we have many clubs that do just that. However, we also have clubs with constraints that don't allow for the full curriculum to be completed. Maybe they can only meet for 30 minutes a week, or they only have the mentors for half of the school year. So for these sites, we've identified common scenarios and mapped out the curriculum to fit those scenarios and ensure students are engaging the most important content. For example, let's take the 11th grade curriculum. There are 77 total activities in the 11th grade. And again, we recommend mentors complete all of them. That's ideal. But in cases where that's not possible, we've created 3 additional maps with 62, 40, and 36 of the activities respectively. The maps ensure that regardless of how much time is available, mentors are getting the most out of the curriculum. Now, one last point I wanted to make. If you want to see the activities, just contact us and we'll schedule some time to talk and preview the materials. We can't send you the books, but we can provide sample activities from each grade level. And with that, I'm very pleased to turn the presentation over to Eva from Alliance College Ready Public Schools in Los Angeles. Alliance is one of our newer partners, having adopted career and college clubs earlier this academic year. And because of that, I think Eva is the perfect person to relate her experience with the program so far. Eva?
Thank you so much, Joe. Well, I'm so pleased to be a part of this great webinar today and to share about how Alliance College Ready Public Schools implemented career and college clubs, as well as to answer any questions that you might have. So just to give a very quick background about Alliance College Ready Public Schools, we are one of the most successful charter public school networks in California. We serve roughly 13,000 students in 25 middle and high schools in Los Angeles. As you can see from these demographics, we serve primarily low-income students of color, as well as vulnerable populations. So we serve 17% English learners and 10% SPED students. Our mission as a network is really to provide a high quality public education in underserved communities that prepares our students for college and career success. To provide just a little bit of the long view about why, this kind of feeds into why we ultimately offered career and college clubs as a program. Our aspiration as a network of public schools is really to deliver a world-class educational experience for our scholars. But our long vision is to achieve a 75% college graduation rate, either from a four-year university or another rigorous post-secondary option. As many of you who are working in either the high school or the post-secondary world know, there are a lot of odds stacked against low-income students as well as students of color. And so this is a very high aspiration that we've set as a network, but it kind of makes sense, especially given the history of our work, where, in our past, we've really focused on college access, right? So getting our students to graduate from high school, kind of beating the odds where a lot of people said, oh, those students from those areas can't graduate. That's just how things are. It's too hard. But we're really proud that we have a 95% high school graduation rate. We have a 95% college acceptance rate. But what we found from the data and from our alumni coming back to talk to us is that they're having, huge struggles in not just matriculating, but persisting and completing college. And so it's with that context in mind that, our pivot to college completion, that we are decided to look at career and college clubs to start earlier with our students. Let's see here. So Joe already gave a really great little background around Gear Up, but I think a big takeaway is, yes, we're a federal grant program, but also we start early with our students. So as early as 7th grade, our cohort is currently in 8th grade. We serve 1,000 students in 7 of our middle schools, and they're about to transition into high school in the next year. Okay, so why did we decide to adopt college and career clubs? As I mentioned earlier, when we looked at our data and we talked to our alumni, many of the reasons about why they were not succeeding in college, even though they had gotten into college, and that involves everything from showing up to class on day one to actually making it through a four-year degree. It stemmed from early awareness and skill building around college and career information, planning and goal setting, as well as self-identity, advocacy, a lot of the kind of developmental skills. A lot of our students said, if only I had known this, if only someone had talked to me about this. And I'm sure, especially for our counselors, teachers, and admin on the line, you've heard that before from your students as well who have graduated from your classrooms. So given that kind of gap that was existing on the end with our alumni, we then turned and looked at our current structure in middle schools, and we found that many of our advisories in the middle schools lacked structure. So there would be kind of one-off lessons that the teachers would pull together. Counselors would push in with lessons related to college, career, or social emotional learning, but it was very sporadic. And it was also a lot of lift for our counselors to reach all students. On the flip side, our teachers didn't really have time to prepare a full curriculum related to college and career. And so, some of our schools have advisory committees where they would try to cobble together enough resources to share amongst each other. So we were looking for something that would support our schools with a turnkey research-based curriculum that would be easy enough for teachers to use so that they could implement it themselves in advisory. And very importantly, that covered key skills and content in a structured, sequenced way that would start preparing our students for success. And that meant not just college and career information, right? Because we could pull lessons from Naviance or some of these other existing free resources, but that holistic student development around goal setting, around self-confidence, leadership, efficacy, study skills, it was hard to find something that had everything. So we were excited that this curriculum incorporated all of those things. We love that it was scaffolded by grade level. So as you might have also discovered if you've searched for materials before, some things out there are kind of like combined, right? So you've got like 7th, 8th grade together in one group of lessons, whereas we wanted something that was very grade level specific. And we love that it was student-led, peer-to-peer, and interactive because we thought it would make the lessons and the learning actually fun rather than always having to be fully delivered by the teacher. And the last note I would make for anyone working in admin or thinking about implementation is that we did like it that it was flexible. So the lessons are broken up into 20, 25-minute activities that you can do, in a shorter period or that you can combine to fill a longer block of time. So let me then now share a little bit about exactly what we did. So I first engaged all of our principals, APs, and counselors in this work. There's a great question here about the kind of how CCC maps to ASCA standards. We actually previewed all of the curriculum and the scope and sequence with our counselors for that reason, to have that intentional alignment with what they knew was important for their students to be learning. And then at the end of the day, 3 of our schools chose to implement it. One's been doing it since the beginning of the school year, and 2 are have launched this spring. 2 of them are doing it twice a week in 25-minute advisory periods. So for those of you who may not be able to fit it, to either have an entire class or to do it after school, it has worked well in that advisory period in giving structure, like I mentioned. The second class actually doubled up on lessons and is doing it twice a week in 60-minute personalized learning blocks. So they're kind of going, really intense with career and college clubs for the spring semester to fill that personalized learning time with the students. I went and actually did a bunch of observations at our school that's been doing it since fall and talked to students and teachers as well. And unanimously across the board, they love the peer-to-peer aspect and the fact that it's student-led. Students told me that they actually look forward to Thursday, they call it Thursday, and it's Thursday and Friday CCCs. So they really it's different when they see that one of their peers is up there leading and teaching. And it also, when it's their turn to go up there, it also kind of shows them how hard it is, right, to lead a classroom, and how and the skills that you build in trying to present information as well as make the activities fun, as well as guiding others through that process. Is just a different skill set. And so they all said it was really fun to have students leading the clubs in their classroom periods. They also liked that there were different and engaging kinds of activities. There's often discussion and group work. So that was something that students expressed that they liked. And, funny enough that, Joe, you mentioned the kind of example of conflict resolution and anti-bullying content within the lessons. Students actually told me that they particularly liked the personal interest identification and the conflict resolution lessons. And it makes sense developmentally, right? Because I think the career and college information is important, and they learn it but they're learning it through the lens of like, why does this matter? Who am I? What am I interested in? And the very immediate kind of content of like, how do I solve problems or deal with conflict among my peers? That's why it appeals to them. So they told me they really like that aspect as well. And finally, I just wanted to share, they love the teachers, especially like that, both shy and extroverted students get the chance to lead. So the way the curriculum is built, obviously teachers ultimately can choose to do it differently in their classrooms. But it's meant to hit every single student in terms of leadership. So one teacher actually had a student that usually never speaks up in class, doesn't really offer opinions or volunteers for things. But he actually, a couple months in, asked the teacher, when's my turning coming up? Like, when do I get to go up there and participate in leading CCC? So I thought that was really neat. And a final thing would be one of the teachers also identified that behaviors actually improved in his classroom because the students realized that teaching, standing up in front of a class for 25 minutes is really hard. So he actually saw some positive gains in student behaviors. Now, on the other side of like what things we identified for improvements or things to be aware of in implementing this curriculum would be there is some lift on the teacher's part in coaching students on how to present, how to read a lesson plan, etc. Students, it's built to be turnkey, but depending on your student population, there will need to be coaching in order for the lessons to be most successful. You may also need more scaffolding for lower reading levels. So Alliance students actually, on average, come to our schools reading 4 to 5 grade levels behind. That's obviously a huge literacy gap. And so our teachers have had to do some filling in on basic vocabulary and how to read some of the content. The materials are geared towards print, which may work great for, I think, a lot of districts. Our schools are very technology based, and so we ended up having to throw some of the lessons onto Google Slides, etc. And you'll find that I think one thing to consider is that there will be some variance in delivery depending on how tight you are with implementation. So ultimately it's the teacher's classroom and how they see best in running the clubs. And so we had some differences, like one teacher actually delivers the lesson and then has the students run the activities themselves. Whereas in other classrooms, it was fully student-led from beginning to end. And so as we look forward, we're really interested in looking at a way to actually track, which classrooms are delivering which lessons, how are they implementing it, so what is the fidelity to the CCC model, as well as a way to assess student growth. So those are 3 things that we would like to see happen in the future. And I'll just wrap up with a couple of takeaways for you all in considering implementation. Is one, that buy-in from your teachers and admin is absolutely critical. Even though we engaged a bunch of stakeholders pretty early on, I think the teacher buy-in is the most important. And if you have a lead teacher that's excited about the program, I think that would make it much easier to implement. The 2 schools that did it this semester, they had a lead teacher identified in the fall who went through the curriculum and trained other teachers. And I think that made all the difference. And we also, I'm just going to skip a little ahead, which is like, I think establishing some kind of feedback loop and teacher learning community around CCC would be very helpful as well, so that they can share what's working well in their classroom and what's not on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. We didn't do that at our school, and we regret not doing that because teachers express that they wish they could have shared some of their learnings with other teachers on an ongoing basis rather than just once a semester. So I think that's another key takeaway. And at the end of the day, this is like a really nice, flexible, turnkey curriculum. And if you have excited folks on the ground who want to learn about it and lead it, I think this is could be a really great option for a number of schools and districts. And that's it from me.
Thanks, Eva. This is Alex Casillas again, and I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes providing a quick summary of what we've learned today before we open the presentation up for Q&A. So first of all, the ACT Holistic Framework has served as a robust foundation for research-based curricula. This is really, one of our first examples of using the holistic framework in this way, and I think, as most people would agree, that it's been very successful. Also, that the heart of Career and College Clubs is sequenced, standards-based curriculum that is focused on 5 important content domains that are helpful for facilitating students' successful transitions from high school to post-secondary and beyond. CCC uses a peer learning model, which Eva just attested is a very engaging way of having students learn about this material. And in each club, students are responsible for basically teaching the curriculum to each other and then working together to share that knowledge, not just with their peers, or even with their parents. And given that many of these students are underserved learners, being able to share that knowledge with their parents is really important. Also, CCC can be implemented in a variety of ways. As Joe alluded, there are different implementation types of maps that are very helpful. And they can be done in school, out of school, as part of curriculum, or even if you're not a GEAR Up program, there's a variety of other ways that you might be able to implement it as part of your programming. And last but not least, as a researcher, I would be remiss in saying that we have a number of research opportunities that, especially for early adopters, we want to make sure that we can, like Eva is saying, there's some things that we could be improving. We want to see how the fidelity of implementation is working out. So there are a number of things that we want to be examining through research. And that's part of the value of having an organization like ACT that is a trusted brand for doing research, to be partner with NCEP on the delivery and investigations of the CCC curriculum. We want to examine which features, which activities, which lessons are working. How do the implementation maps work for different institutions, right? Are they getting sort of similar bang for their buck, or is there a particular map that is most effective? We'll hypothesize it would be the full map with all the lessons, but maybe that's not the case. We'd like to know that. And part of it is because we want to make this an iterative effort, right? All good design, you never get it right the first time around. We want to make sure that this curriculum continues to be refreshed and supported by the latest research, by the latest knowledge. Part of it is not just what we learn from the literature, but it's what we learn by doing case studies and investigations with individual schools and districts and sites, like the kinds of work that Eva and her team are doing. So with that said, I'm just going to turn it to Will, our organizer, and he will lead the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Alex. Once again, please use the questions panel there on your screen to ask questions. And we do have a few that have come in. Alex, can everybody hear me? Okay. Alex, most of our listeners lost some audio as you were beginning to describe the holistic framework there at the very beginning. Can you quickly kind of reiterate why a holistic approach is important when creating or adjusting a curriculum?
Absolutely. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Basically, the holistic framework is a very comprehensive model of knowledge and skills that are needed for education and workplace context. Many of you are probably, looking at what you're doing in your work every day at schools, emphasizing mathematics and ELA as the primary ways of helping students to succeed. And while those are very important, they are foundational. They are necessary, but not sufficient. We realize that at ACT, we have known this for many years, and so the holistic framework, which we are now basically using to develop all of our products and services, is one way to advance a more comprehensive and really 21st century knowledge that is required to be able to help students succeed, not just academically and in the workforce, but really in life in general.
Okay. We've got a question for Eva. This one comes from Connie. She had a couple of questions, actually. She wanted some information as to how the peer leaders are chosen. Are they typically from the junior or senior class? And she'd also like you to answer if you're seeing a difference between when you had mentioned the two schools, one of them giving a 25-minute, spending 25 minutes 2 times, or 60 minutes 2 times, if you see a difference in terms of the outcomes with between those two schools.
Sure. So the question on how students are chosen, we're implementing now in middle schools, and they're chosen within the same advisory class of the same grade. So we're not doing cross grade level implementation. So for example, in one 8th grade advisory class, the leaders would be chosen from that same class. Teachers are actually doing it a wide variety of ways. One actually selected some kind of quote unquote natural leaders, or they're more extroverted students, to lead in the beginning of the semester to model how CCC could work. Another teacher solicited volunteers, so who was willing to do it at first before opening it up to the rest of the students. And then a third was just going down the roster actually and assigning every single student the week that they would be leading. And that teacher mentioned the benefit of that is, not having to go through the whole, who wants to do it this week spiel every week, but also it gave students some time to prepare ahead of time. And it also made sure that every single student would be leading at some point during the semester and the year. So those are 3 ways of assigning or choosing peer leaders. And to your question of, am I seeing a difference in outcomes? To be very honest with you, the 60-minute personalized learning block implementation has just started, so I can't speak to how well it's the outcomes yet. But I will say in the planning process, I think 60-minute sessions allow a little bit more time. The 25-minute session works, but as you know, if you're a teacher or counselor in a school setting, as soon as you get the students settled, it's really 20 minutes of content. And so for certain lessons, it didn't feel like enough time. But for other lessons, it was plenty of time. So if that works within your block schedule, then it's still, it still has some outcomes for students.
This is Joe. If I can just piggyback off of what Eva said. We have surveyed previous users of career and college clubs about how they implement, how much time, that sort of thing. And clearly the 60 minutes or 1 hour once a week is what sites report as being the most effective way to implement the program. But we also, that said, we have had a number of sites who only do 30 minutes and they, with a little bit of adjustment are able to do just fine. It's really, when we designed the curriculum, the update curriculum, we really tried to take both of those in mind and try to make it really worthwhile, regardless of how much time you have.
Okay, and kind of piggybacking off that question, we have a question from Bob. This is for Joe and for Eva. He said that he heard Eva mention that the classroom is teacher-led and that students then lead the activities. He wants to know whether that has worked well.
Yeah, for that teacher, she's mentioned that it's worked well. She's I think in her first or second year, so I think she was a little hesitant to relinquish control that early. But she said the lessons are great for the teacher and she was willing to deliver the lessons herself. And then she really enjoyed having the students take the leadership in the majority of not just basically running small groups of the activities and monitoring how well that was working. So for her, that structure has worked well. I think she does lose a little bit of the gains in student leadership if you really have a student have to, read through and learn a lesson plan and lead up front. But nevertheless, she said that she liked it and it was working well for her.
Yeah, great. Again, this is Joe. We really try to emphasize with our clubs to embrace the student-led model and let students take charge and fail if that happens. There's a lot of learning that can happen from failing. And when a club comes on board, part of the onboarding process, we help train the coaches how to take a step back and let students facilitate. It's really, in some cases, the hardest part of implementation is getting particularly teachers in the mindset that to let go of control of the classroom. But if they do, and they're able to do it, and again, it's, they're the professionals, so they have to use their discretion over, with their students, how much they can let go and how much they can't. But the more they're able to do it, the more engaging and more excited we find the kids are.
Okay, we had a question for Alex and Joe about the importance of social and emotional learning. Why is it important that curricula be either adjusted or created with social and emotional learning in mind?
So this is Alex. Let me take a first shot at this, and then I'll have Joe supplement. So this is not just from research. Obviously, there's lots and lots of research, literally thousands of articles looking at the personality and behavior literature before even the term social emotional learning kind of became popular. There's 50 years worth of research that suggests that these characteristics help to make successful outcomes at all kinds of levels of education, work, and life outcomes. So we know, and I think, when you look back and you think about, the kind of wisdom that grandma used to give you, many of these things are, people who work harder experience more benefits, right? People who are more organized or people who get along well with others are able to do well in a variety of settings. So this is not necessarily rocket science in most cases, but we do have a lot of research support as to why this is important. And unfortunately, the way that a lot of school curricula have gone in the last 20 years or so, the emphasis in those skills really have been, for the most part, kind of pulled out. And by emphasizing only core academic skills like math and reading, and to some extent science, while those are very important, we have de-emphasized this emphasis on very important skills that are needed for success. So having curriculum like this that is well structured, that is research based, and has been very thoughtfully done, allows you to kind of bring some of that emphasis back, because we know that students, and from our own research, we know that students who, even if they're really book smart and they have great ACT scores on math and English and science, if they don't have some of these skills, they don't transition successfully to college, and they may even, they may fail classes, they may drop out. And so we have lots of evidence suggesting that these skills are really essential. Joe?
Well, this is a great example of why having ACT as a partner is so fantastic. I couldn't add anything to what Alex just said. I think he perfectly summarized it.
Okay. Joe, we have a question from Luis, who wants to know, how does the CCC curriculum adapt for English language learners in terms of increasing the number of students from 7 to 12 that are 2 to 3 years below grade level? Can you speak to that?
Sure, that's a great question. The curriculum was written at a grade level, at grade level language. So we don't have different curricula for different levels of learning. But what we do is, in the activities, we try to differentiate the instruction so that it can account for different levels of learning or English proficiency. It's a difficult nut to crack. We've been doing this for 10 years, and we've gotten requests to translate into probably about 6 or 7 different languages. The resources just aren't there to do that. But we do try to take that into consideration, and as we have students making presentations to their parents and talking with their parents, incorporating tips and activities to help them to do that effectively.
Okay, we've just got a couple of minutes left. Again, we'll get to as many questions as we can. The ones we don't have time to get to, we will reach out by email in the next couple of days. We had a question from Mike, who said, research indicates that parental or caregiver involvement is very important to current and future success. Are there places that provide a natural fit for these stakeholders to take responsibility?
Yeah, so this is Joe. Let me take a shot at fielding that question. There are natural places for adults or caregivers to engage with the student, and particularly around the college and career readiness domains. So there are, as you get closer to graduation, there are many steps in the college application and college admissions process that require parental involvement. And so we have activities to help students to engage with their parents, sit down with their parents, talk about the FAFSA really early on. I think starting in 9th or 10th grade, to start talking with their parents or the caregivers about these issues, as well as in the middle grade years, I think more, talking with them about careers and career planning and their parents' journeys professionally, and what they learned and what advice they can give to the students. So we really try to, in a natural way, have students begin to talk with their parents and adults in the community about these issues of, hey, what am I going to do in life and how am I going to get there, and try to learn from their wisdom.
Okay, and we're going to take one more question. And Eva, I think you can answer this one. This is from Stacy, who wants to know, is this something that could be successfully implemented with a small group of students versus doing this statewide?
Oh, that's a good question. We implemented it obviously classroom and school wide. But I remember when we were reviewing the curriculum that a CCC staff member had told me that some schools do it as an after school program. So a counselor or just one teacher will identify a small group of students that wants to participate. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had mentioned that that was also another model of implementation.
Absolutely. We have a whole variety of different models. We have small groups of students, we have whole grade levels, and we have whole schools. The real key is to make sure that each student who is in the club has that leadership opportunity to lead sessions, lead some of the lessons, and really facilitate the learning of their peers.
Okay, and with that, we're at the top of the hour. We've had quite a few questions come in about the CCC curriculum in particular. Joe Booth is the one who can answer those questions. His email is there on the screen, so be sure to take note of that. Otherwise, I'd like to thank Eva, Joe, and Alex for presenting our webinar today. Remember that you'll receive a recording of today's presentation and the slideshow in the next couple of days, along with links to further information based on what was presented today. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Please follow ACT on social media to learn more about upcoming webinars and special events. You can find our social media channels at www.act.org/social. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.